Every single one of us knows this tale, though few can articulate it, the story of the child on the outside. Picture them standing near the monkey bars, eyes fixed on the other children's laughter, their games of tag, the whispered secrets. A nervous energy vibrates within them. What unspoken rule keeps them apart? At first, it's a pinprick of disappointment, easily brushed aside. But as the moments stretch into an eternity, the feeling deepens, etching itself into the chambers of the heart. If you've known that feeling, even fleetingly, you understand the weight of unspoken rejection. And if you've never stood in those shoes, you've likely felt a distant echo of that loneliness in some other guise. Exclusion isn't confined to the playground. It seeps into classrooms, fractures families, festers in workplaces, and permeates the very fabric of our societies. And the underlying psychology wields a far greater power than most of us acknowledge. Here's the startling truth. Our need for belonging is as fundamental as our need for food, water, and shelter. Brain scans reveal that social rejection lights up the same neural pathways as physical pain. That's why a snide remark or a clandestine whisper can leave a bruise invisible to the eye. For a child still mapping the contours of the world, these experiences leave even deeper scars. They are more than just passing moments. They become distorted mirrors reflecting back the chilling message, "You don't fit. You're not good enough." The excluded child isn't simply missing out on a game of kickball. They're burdened by a profound sense of invisibility, a weight that, over time, reshapes their self-perception. Why does it hurt so deeply? To understand, we must journey back, not only to childhood, but to the dawn of humankind. For the vast majority of our evolutionary history, belonging wasn't a luxury, it was essential for survival. A lone human in the wilderness was acutely vulnerable. Connection meant shared meals, early warnings of danger, and the collective construction of shelter. Our nervous system, therefore, evolved a highly sensitive alarm system. Exclusion equals danger. Even today, though our physical survival may no longer hinge on tribal affiliation, our minds and bodies still react as if it does. This is why the excluded child doesn't merely feel sadness, they experience a primal threat that words can barely capture. Their body floods with stress hormones. Their brain hyper-focuses, registering every nuance of rejection, each averted gaze, every private joke, every shared moment from which they are absent. Slowly, a pattern emerges. The child anticipates exclusion before it even materializes. They hesitate to raise their hand in class, linger on the periphery, carefully censor their thoughts and opinions, carrying the internalized belief, "If I stay quiet, perhaps I won't be pushed away again." Now consider how this pattern unfolds as they mature. The classroom metamorphoses into the workplace. The playground transforms into society at large. And unless something disrupts this cycle, the invisible barrier remains. They might achieve professional success, surround themselves with friends and acquaintances, but deep down, that wounded child still whispers, "What if they leave? What if I don't truly belong?" The tragic irony is that this very fear of exclusion can trigger behaviors that push connection further away. They might become excessively cautious, clingy, or guarded, the pain of exclusion morphing into a self-fulfilling prophecy. But the story becomes even more intricate, more poignant, when we recognize that exclusion shapes not only the excluded, but also the excluders. Children quickly learn who holds the reins of power within a group. Sometimes exclusion isn't deliberate cruelty. It's a way of testing the boundaries of belonging, solidifying the lines between us and them. Psychologists refer to this as in-group and out-group behavior, a phenomenon that manifests everywhere from children's games to international politics. Our yearning for belonging is so powerful that we sometimes exclude others simply to reinforce our own sense of place. While the child on the outside is wounded, those doing the excluding are also learning profound lessons about power dynamics, empathy, or the lack thereof, and the construction of identity. These seemingly insignificant moments reverberate outward, shaping not only individual narratives but entire cultures. What makes this particularly potent is how exclusion molds identity. Imagine a child consistently excluded from games. Over time, they may conclude not that others are unkind, but that they themselves are inherently unworthy. This is the insidious twist of the human mind. We personalize exclusion, internalizing it as a reflection of our own deficiencies. Instead of thinking, "They excluded me," the child concludes, "I am the kind of person who is not worth including." This belief can harden into a rigid self-concept, a filter through which they interpret every experience, guiding every decision. Decades later, that same person might hesitate to apply for a dream job, to embark on a meaningful relationship, or to share their artistic gifts with the world, not because they lack the talent or the drive, but because they fundamentally believe they are an outsider, destined to remain on the fringes. One childhood playground becomes a lifetime of hesitation. And yet here lies a paradox. Many of the world's most creative, insightful, and compassionate individuals were once excluded children. Why? Because exclusion offers a unique perspective. When you're on the periphery, observing from the outside, you perceive nuances that others miss. You discern patterns, understand unspoken dynamics, and develop empathy for those who are consistently overlooked. Pain, when alchemized, becomes profound perception. This doesn't diminish the pain of exclusion, it leaves lasting scars, without a doubt. But sometimes, those scars become intricate maps, guiding a person to a deeper understanding of the human condition. Some of the greatest works of literature, philosophy, and art have emerged from voices that once felt marginalized, silenced. The excluded child, upon finding healing, often transforms into the adult who gives voice to the voiceless. However, healing doesn't happen by accident. It requires conscious awareness, both personal and collective. On a personal level, it necessitates disentangling your identity from your experience. You were excluded, but you are not exclusion itself. You felt invisible, but you are not invisibility. On a collective level, it demands recognizing the subtle ways in which we continue to erect invisible barriers. Who is invited into the inner circle of conversations? Whose voices are amplified? Who is consistently overlooked, not out of malice, but out of ingrained habit? Every culture, every classroom, every workplace harbors these dynamics, and the cost of ignoring them is immense, not just for the individuals excluded, but for the collective richness of what we could become if every voice were heard, valued, and celebrated. There's another layer to this that often goes unnoticed. Children don't learn about exclusion solely from their peers. They learn it from adults too. A teacher who unconsciously favors more assertive students can inadvertently silence those who are more reserved. A parent preoccupied with their own struggles might fail to see a child's unspoken needs. Even well-intentioned families sometimes overlook the emotional well-being of a child who doesn't conform to expectations. And when children sense this kind of exclusion within their own homes, the wound cuts even deeper, because home is meant to be the one place where belonging is unconditional. Studies in developmental psychology have consistently demonstrated that children who feel emotionally excluded, even in subtle ways, are more likely to grapple with anxiety, depression, and a pervasive difficulty in forming trusting relationships in adulthood. It's not about a single incident, but about the insidious accumulation of patterns. The human brain, particularly during childhood, is a pattern-detecting machine. And if the dominant pattern it perceives is "I don't belong," that deeply ingrained belief can reverberate for decades. Yet, as painful as this is, there's profound hope to be found in the neurosciences. The brain is not a static entity. Our sense of identity is not set in stone. Neuroscience has shown us that through new experiences, supportive relationships, and the conscious cultivation of self-compassion, we can literally rewire those deeply entrenched patterns. The excluded child within us can learn new lessons. They can learn that exclusion was never a reflection of their inherent worthlessness, but rather a testament to the fragility of human groups, the limitations of others' awareness, and the universal struggle we all face in our quest to belong. In fact, realizing that nearly everyone, at some point in their lives, has felt like the excluded child can itself be deeply healing, because suddenly the wall is no longer between you and everyone else. The wall is revealed to be an illusion, constructed from fleeting moments of fear, but it does not define the entirety of life. So, let me pose this question. If nearly every human being has experienced the sting of exclusion, what would shift if we all consciously remembered that truth in our daily interactions? What if, instead of unconsciously perpetuating patterns of exclusion, we consciously chose to become builders of inclusion? What if every time you noticed someone on the margins, you paused and asked yourself, what small gesture could make them feel seen and valued today? Sometimes it's as simple as making eye contact, offering a genuine smile, asking a sincere question. To the group, it might seem inconsequential, but to the excluded child, it can feel like sunlight piercing through the darkest storm clouds. This isn't merely theoretical idealism. Research on belonging consistently demonstrates that even seemingly small gestures can dramatically alter outcomes. One study revealed that when teachers wrote encouraging notes on student essays, those students not only improved academically, but also reported feeling significantly more connected and confident. Another study showcased that workplaces with ingrained cultures of inclusion experienced higher levels of creativity, stronger overall performance, and lower employee turnover. Inclusion is not simply about being kind, it's about unlocking human potential, tapping into a reservoir of untapped talent and innovation. And every excluded child who is welcomed back into the fold doesn't just heal, they bring with them a depth of insight, a unique perspective that the group might never have discovered on its own. But there's another crucial reason why the story of the excluded child resonates so deeply. It's not solely about the formative experiences of childhood. It's about what those early wounds reveal to us about the very essence of being human. To feel excluded is, in many ways, to confront the most primal fear of existence, the fear of being utterly alone in a world that often feels vast, indifferent, and uncaring. And yet, paradoxically, this same experience illuminates the deepest longing we all share. The longing to be seen, understood, and accepted for exactly who we are, flaws and all. The excluded child isn't simply a solitary figure on a playground. The excluded child is a reflection, a microcosm of the human condition itself. Consider this. Every culture, every philosophy, every religion at its core grapples with the same fundamental question: where do I belong? Who am I in relation to others? The pain of exclusion reminds us of how fragile our sense of self can be, how easily it can be shattered, but also of how incredibly resilient we can become when we actively seek belonging, not just from external sources, but from within ourselves. This is one of the most transformative shifts a person can make. The realization that belonging is not solely something bestowed upon us by a group, but something we can cultivate within ourselves, a sense of inherent worth that remains unshaken by external circumstances. For the excluded child who matures into adulthood, the journey of healing often begins with the profound recognition that the absence of belonging in the external world does not equate to an absence of worth within. Still, this is often easier said than done because exclusion leaves echoes, subtle reverberations that linger long after the initial wound has seemingly healed. It shows up in the way you hesitate before voicing your opinion in a group setting, the way you second-guess whether your story truly matters, the way you instinctively shrink your dreams before anyone else has the chance to reject them. These echoes can be subtle, almost imperceptible, but they are undeniably real, shaping your choices and limiting your potential. And yet, this is where psychology offers a powerful path forward. Studies have shown that when individuals reframe their past experiences, not as personal failures or inherent flaws, but as manifestations of universal human struggles, they begin to loosen the grip of those old wounds. Instead of thinking, "I was excluded because I wasn't good enough," the narrative subtly shifts to, "I was excluded because every group, every human being struggles with fear, with boundaries, with the inherent limitations of their own perspectives." This reframing doesn't magically erase the pain, but it fundamentally alters the meaning we ascribe to it. And meaning in the end is what allows wounds to transform into wisdom. There's a beautiful concept in developmental psychology known as post-traumatic growth, which describes how individuals, after enduring significant hardship, can actually develop greater empathy, deeper resilience, and a stronger sense of purpose. The excluded child, if given the opportunity to heal and to integrate their experiences, often transforms into the adult who notices the lonely co-worker standing by the water cooler, who actively listens when no one else seems to be paying attention, who consciously creates spaces of welcome and belonging that they themselves once yearned for. In this way, the pain of exclusion can ripple outward, transforming into acts of compassion that profoundly change lives. It's as if the wound, once acknowledged and integrated, becomes a doorway, not just back into belonging for oneself, but into creating belonging for others. And yet, we must never romanticize exclusion. It is painful, it is damaging, and it is something no child should ever have to endure. The reason it's so vital to understand this underlying psychology is not to suggest that exclusion is somehow inherently beneficial, but rather to recognize how profoundly powerful our role can be in either perpetuating it or actively interrupting it. Every day we stand at a crossroads, armed with our words, our attention, our awareness. We can choose to reinforce the invisible walls, or we can begin, brick by brick, to dismantle them. We can either implicitly teach children through our silence and inaction that exclusion is normal, or we can consciously teach them through our compassion and intentionality that every voice deserves a place at the table. And make no mistake, the stakes are incredibly high. Excluded children are statistically more likely to withdraw academically, to disengage socially, and to develop debilitating anxiety about participation. Over time, these deeply ingrained patterns can cascade into adulthood, negatively impacting their relationships, their careers, and even their physical and mental health. Loneliness, after all, is not simply an emotion. It is a potent biological stressor. Research has consistently shown that chronic loneliness can weaken the immune system, increase inflammation throughout the body, and even shorten life expectancy. This means that seemingly fleeting playground moment of exclusion is not, in fact, a small thing. It is the seed of outcomes that can reach far into the future, shaping the trajectory of an entire life. When we truly understand the gravity of this, the way we treat each other in those seemingly insignificant moments begins to appear far more significant, far more consequential. But let us pause here and consider the other side of the coin. If exclusion can shape a life in such profoundly painful ways, then inclusion, by its very nature, can shape it in equally profound ways, offering healing, hope, and the promise of a brighter future. A single moment of genuine welcome, a single gesture of heartfelt recognition can redirect a child's entire story, altering the course of their life for the better. A teacher who notices the quiet student hiding in the back of the classroom. A peer who extends an invitation to the overlooked kid to join in the game. A parent who affirms the unique qualities of their child instead of constantly comparing them to others. These moments may seem small, almost insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but psychologically, they are enormous. They communicate to the child, in a language that transcends words, "You belong here. You are a valued part of us. Your presence matters. You are seen, you are heard, you are loved." And when a child truly internalizes that message, when they deeply believe that they belong, their entire world shifts. The invisible wall begins to dissolve, replaced by a sense of connection, belonging, and inherent worth. The truth is that we all possess the power to be that person for the children in our lives, for our friends and family members, for the strangers we encounter in our daily journeys, and perhaps most importantly, for ourselves. To remember what it felt like to be excluded is to hold a powerful map, a compass that guides us toward creating genuine connection, fostering empathy, and building a more inclusive world. Every time you consciously choose to listen when it would be easier to simply ignore, every time you open up a space for someone who has been left out, you are not just changing a moment, you are actively changing a pattern, disrupting the cycle of exclusion and replacing it with a cycle of belonging. And when patterns change, lives change. Now, let's delve even deeper, exploring the philosophical underpinnings of this phenomenon. What does it truly mean, on a philosophical level, to live in a world where exclusion is so pervasive, so deeply ingrained in the human experience? Some philosophical thinkers have posited that exclusion is, in a sense, inevitable, an inherent byproduct of the human tendency to form groups. They argue that anytime human beings coalesce into a group, whether it's a small social circle or a large nation-state, boundaries will inevitably be drawn, and someone, inevitably, will be left out, standing on the other side of that line. There may well be some truth to that assertion, but inevitability is not synonymous with destiny. We may not be able to completely eradicate exclusion from the human experience, but we can fundamentally transform the way we respond to it, both individually and collectively. We can consciously choose to recognize that exclusion, in its essence, reveals far more about the inherent fragility of groups, their need to define themselves in opposition to others, than it does about the inherent worth of the individuals who are excluded. And in recognizing that fundamental truth, we can begin to live differently, not chasing belonging as a means of validating our self-worth, but rather offering belonging as an act of radical humanity, a way of affirming the inherent dignity of every human being. The excluded child then becomes a teacher, a powerful reminder of our shared humanity, a teacher of empathy, a teacher of resilience, a teacher of what it truly means to carry pain and still choose love, still choose connection, still choose to see the inherent worth in every living being. The reality is that many of us still carry that excluded child inside us, a part of ourselves that remembers the sting of rejection, the ache of loneliness, the feeling of not being good enough. And perhaps, just perhaps, the most profound act of healing we can undertake is to turn to that inner child, to offer them the unconditional love and acceptance they always deserved, and to finally say the words they always needed to hear. You belong. You always belonged. Even when others couldn't see it, even when the world seemed to be telling you otherwise, your worth was never missing, your value was never diminished. Saying those words, even silently, even just to yourself, can shift the entire trajectory of a life. Because belonging at its deepest level is not about fitting into a circle drawn by others, conforming to their expectations, or earning their approval. It is about realizing deep in your heart that the circle was never truly closed in the first place, that you are already and have always been an integral part of something larger, something infinite, something profoundly and beautifully human. So, where does this leave us as individuals and as a society? It leaves us with a challenge, a call to action, to consciously notice the excluded child, both in the world around us and within ourselves. To ask ourselves, where are the invisible walls that I am consciously or unconsciously maintaining? Who around me feels unseen, unheard, uninvited, marginalized? And what small intentional act could I offer today to remind them of their inherent worth, their value, their undeniable place in the unfolding human story? These are not merely abstract philosophical questions. They are practical, actionable steps that we can take every single day. Because in every classroom, in every family, in every workplace, there is undoubtedly someone right now feeling the quiet ache of exclusion, carrying the weight of invisibility. And your awareness, your simple gesture of kindness, your heartfelt invitation might very well be the turning point in their story, the moment that shifts them from the margins to the center, from feeling unseen to feeling truly and deeply seen. And here is the final, perhaps most crucial thought. The excluded child is not a symbol of weakness or vulnerability, but rather a symbol of truth, a reminder of the inherent longing for connection that resides within every human heart. They remind us that every single human being, regardless of their background, their beliefs, or their experiences, carries the same fundamental longing. To be part of something larger than themselves, to matter, to be seen, to be heard, to be valued, to belong. When we consciously remember that shared longing, when we honor it in ourselves and in others, we can begin to build a different kind of world. A world where belonging is not a prize to be earned or a privilege to be granted, but a gift to be freely shared, a fundamental human right. A world where no one has to stand on the sidelines wondering what invisible wall keeps them out, longing to be included. A world where the words we offer, the spaces we create, the compassion we extend, quietly but powerfully rewrite the story, transforming it from one of exclusion and isolation to one of connection, belonging, and profound, unwavering love. So, the next time you see someone standing alone or feel yourself retreating into silence, remember this. The story of the excluded child does not have to end in exclusion. It can end in recognition, in empathy, in profound understanding. It can end in connection, in the simple but radical act of saying, "You belong. You are welcome here. You are valued. You are loved." And perhaps in consciously saying it to others, we can finally learn to believe it ourselves, to embrace our own inherent worth, and to find our own unshakable sense of belonging.